Hello and welcome to this tutorial on how to create a simple login and registration system using Java. So in this video we'll be going through a step-by-step explanation of the code that is used for the system. So we're going to start off by taking a look at the front end code, which is responsible for handling the user inputs and displaying outputs. We begin by importing the scanner class, which allows us to read input from the user. We then create a new scanner object and a login object. Next, we declare several variables to hold the user's input for the username, password, first name, and last name. And we then prompt the user to enter. We then indicate to the user that they have been welcomed to the registration page, and then after that we will prompt the user to enter a username that meets the certain criteria, which is it must contain an underscore and it must contain 4 characters. I'm supposed to change that to 5 characters according to my knowledge, excuse me. And so if the user does not enter valid username, we will display an error message, which is the username is not correctly formatted. Please ensure that your username contains an underscore and is no more than 5 characters in length. And then now, after that, if the code does go through, if the user does enter a correctly formatted username, then we will now prompt the user to enter a password that meets this certain criteria. And that is, it must contain at least 8 characters in total, must contain an uppercase character, must contain a digit, and must contain a special character. We then prompt the user to enter their first name and their last name. If the registration process is unsuccessful, if it is successful, actually, let's first talk about that. We call the login user method. Excuse me. Yes, we're gonna call the login user method, which then prompts the user to enter their username and password. And if the login is successful, then we display a welcome message that includes the user's first name and their last name. I'm going to show you how we do that on the backend class. So now let's take a look at this backend code, which is responsible for checking the validity of the user's input and handling the login process. So we begin by obviously declaring several instance variables, so hold the username, password, first name, and last name. And then we define a method called check username, which takes a username as a parameter and returns a Boolean value. I don't know how else to explain it, but the Boolean value indicates whether the username meets the required criteria, which is stated in the front-end class, that it must be no more than 5 characters and it must contain an underscore. And then next, after this, we will define a method called check password complexity, which takes a password as a parameter, and then it will return a Boolean value, which indicates whether the password meets the required criteria, which is also stated in the front-end class. It has to be at least 8 characters in length, it must contain an uppercase, a digit, and a special character, I believe. And now we then are going to define a method called login user, which takes a username, password, first name, and last name as parameters. and this method checks whether the entire the username that's the user enters and the password match the stored username and password. So if the login is successful, it will display this message, and if it is unsuccessful, it will display an error message, as you can see over here. Yes. And then now over here we have defined a method called register user, which checks whether the entered username and password meets the required criteria using the check username and check password complexity methods. So if the username and password are valid, then it's obviously going to return a success message. But if they're not valid, then it will return these error messages. And then finally, we have defined a method called return login status, which takes a Boolean value over here, indicating whether the login was successful as a parameter. So the method returns a message indicating whether the login was successful or unsuccessful. And that's it for the tutorial on creating a simple login and registration system in Java. And I hope this video makes sense. But thank you for watching. Goodbye.